I grew up in India in a mega city called Calcutta and then went to do CPA. And then instead of joining an audit firm, I joined a bank.
Sure.
And they were in development financing and investment banking. So basically doing brownfield and greenfield projects for the development of India's economy, as well as, taking them eventually to listing. So in a way, they were although bank, it's pretty much a very earlier format of what we pretty much do today in the private market. Although that, we are not like a PE, we are not directly participate in the management. It's rather reverse inquiry basis that we do participate if the founders want us to help them out in some way or the other. So there was a lot of learning across a cross section of industry, from mining to tea gardens, from hospitals to glassmaking. And that was one of the best period of Indian banking sector. It was literally coming out and redefining moments. That's where, venture capital started coming in even. So the bank eventually came into a venture capital arm. And that's what we had financing from the bank with which I came in Singapore in 2001. Here they call it expat, but in a way you can say I was just moving in as an immigrant in a way. I had no business, I had no employees, I had no revenues, and only just one investor who has given me some initial seed capital. And from there, in the next 10 years, I built up a startup that would have today been called FinTech, B2B FinTech.
Yeah.
And that has a very wonderful outcome at the end of 10 years, at least for me. I could earn my first carry. And that made me think that I need to stay on to technology, but no more doing a startup, but trying to invest in the millennials, the Gen Z and the Gen Ys, and try and be part of their journey to make this world a few shades better than what we inherited.
Yeah. And now, what I'll say too is, I was going to say too, Debneel, wanted to add this is like, so when you're a founder, all of your energy is in one venture, right? You're kind of spending all of your time and energy. So all of your eggs are in one basket. But I think the benefit with venture and being an investor is you can support multiple ventures at scale, I would say.
Absolutely. And in the process, we get an awesome learning. The main theme. So the common denominator for my life's journey, even today, which I pursue, if one single thing that I really wake up to every morning, is that how could you be contrarian yet correct?
Yeah.
So all through, when I was on the CPA, the basic thing was like, go and join an audit firm, PwC, Ernst & Young, or do consulting with McKinsey. Yeah. But I didn't do that. I rather joined a bank that was into development, financial and investment banking.
Yeah.
And very few people knew about it. We didn't have physical branches, so to say, so a lot of my senior relatives, they told me, is that a scam? Do you really work for a bank, or they are going to really scamming us?
Sure.
So that was the way. And that's where you see our tagline in Decacon, we say the world is our oyster. Basically, what we try to mean is that we don't belong to any nationality or any race, religion, caste, creed. It's all about where the best work is happening in our space at this moment, at this time and tide. And therefore we go there. And that's where, 64% of our portfolio today is in America. It's not that something we embarked upon with a number in mind. But then that's where we found the most awesome businesses, the most awesome founders, and also the most awesome ecosystem, the community. And the second largest today in our portfolio, about 20%, is Israel. Although, we are far away in Asia. So that's a very different narrative. And even the same way, we have set us up in a very different way. We are not those 100-mile radius VCs who go and invest in people out of garage and then try to tell them or mentor them their way up. Because I believe that if I can mentor someone and do him a startup, then I should do it myself.
Yeah.
Rather, it should be if somebody comes in. So we try to do a string of pearls. That is, we try to see that there's an ecosystem of traction or a community that we build within that string of pearls, so that one of my startup could be a vendor to another startup, and the other startup, he has a big problem, and he can use one of my other startup to actually solve that problem. So we are just now looking at an automation for the programmers and for the founders, a company based in LA, and they're basically doing DevOps automation, but in a very, very unique way. And that's what we often like. And this could be some company that could be used by every other company in my portfolio.
Yeah, it can complement, the companies can complement each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's something, when people are not like, just now we finished doing a cybersecurity in Israel, and they were full with money. Because good companies, you really have to sell them. They will come and tell you, why should I take your money? I have money.
Yeah.
Tell me what you can bring. And if you tell them, I'll give you network, I'll give you some connection with the government in Singapore and the home police in Singapore and the defense ministry. That's not good enough. Every other country, they may not be even interested right now to look into Singapore. They may be more interested to look into America. So those doesn't work. And so this is where we create that value, where we make them talk to our other founders. And then we have some awesome people in our team. We basically talk our way through when people doesn't want to give us a foot in the door in their cap table, so to say.
Yeah.
So basically, when we start talking their business, the things that they don't expect other people or an investor may know in such great detail, that's where I think the ice melts. So this is, I'll stop here. In brief, this is what we do, and this is what's our thematics or philosophies are. I mean, you have to be at the right place at the right time. And today's time, I think most of the true innovative work, solving the hard problem, I think it's most happening in America, and where you can actually get a very transparent or a level playing field. I mean, you don't have interventions coming from regulation or from governments in such big way that you don't even know what's happening in that industry, or there is a strict protectionism as in some parts of the world.
So taking a step back, one thing that I always love is entrepreneur stories. So tell me a little bit more about how you started the company, how you came up with the idea, and then who the customer was, and how did you get, tell me about your first customer. I love like, you probably got to think back a little bit, but you'd never forget your first customer.
Of course. I mean, it's like first love. It's like first love. So we were a bank, and the bank was expanding very heavily. By the time I had joined, it has moved from development financing into consumer banking license. Very rarely India has given consumer banking license. In my whole life, I think India has given 4 consumer banking licenses, the central bank, and 3 of them were given in that period, and I think 2 later on. And so we were one of them. And so we were expanding very heavily, and not just into banking, into insurance, into risk management, such as, AML and ALMs kind of, so anti-money laundering. So there were like very new words. Like I first heard AML back in the turn of the millennium kind of thing, when it was really software started coming out of it. So they were all going into all this, and the bank wanted to be a differentiator. So therefore, they didn't want to hire run-on-the-mill or buy run-on-the-mill products from elsewhere, which every other competitor is using. And that's where, we came in the exposure into technology from a business standpoint. So we used to give the business knowledge, and Tata Consultancy used to write codes for us. And that was like our proprietary. We had a separate division that was created to do this kind of technology-related moat or differentiator for the bank, so that it can move off or march ahead and quickly become the number uno, which it did. So once, by the time the dot-com bubble bust happened, I felt that, again, the contrarian thought process, I felt it has given us a time to refresh ourselves, reboot ourselves. And that's where I moved on. I could have gone to America, but I felt that's quite a crowded space. Why go into Red Ocean? So let's try and go somewhere where there is a lot of opportunity, hardly anything has happened. And there I can gain pricing power. And that's where I came into this part of the world. So Singapore, Southeast Asia, North Asia, East Asia, whatever America calls in American White House parlance is Far East.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just for the context of everyone else, the geography that I'm talking about. So when we came in here, I first of all the products that I had, I realized that insurance companies are way far behind the curve. So I started with actually going after the insurance industry. And luckily from the bank sources, we had a product. And which we could, given the mandate that we could go out and now sell it and monetize it. And we have to pay them some kind of a license fee for a limited period of time. And that's when we went in. I priced the product very differently. And I first went in, despite being English speaking, I started going in non-English speaking markets. Again, contrarian, trying to head after the blue ocean, trying to take the deep end of the pool first, while everybody else is trying to start from the shallow end. And somehow, that worked for me. And my first customer came in Malaysia. They were Islamic insurance company, like they had just got a bank and an insurance company who got just a Islamic insurance company license. And much of that I didn't even have in my product. And then by then I don't even have a tent in their country. So I still remember at 8 p.m., the CEO who was at the final stage, they really liked our product, what we gave them. And they liked us more. It's more like, you are now liking the founders more than their solution. And you know that you have a big problem in hand. Yeah. And you know that these guys can deliver. They may require some mentoring and some guiding and something here, there. And he says that, help me decide, you don't even have a tent here. And how do I trust you? I said, you take my source code. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's the kind of thing, Yeah. Then he agreed, no, I don't want to take your source code. Let's put the source code in escrow. I said, fine. Oh, interesting. Okay. So at least I can take it out if tomorrow you are no more, and my IT department then can work. And one of the cornerstones of our investment in you will be, you have to do knowledge transfer. You have to teach us. Yeah. And then they gave us again a lot of domain knowledge, how to do Islamic insurance. And we quickly fitted them. In fact, they did a pilot with us, gave us one product, which they said, I give you 2 weeks, map the product and bring it back to us. We brought in, we did it. And that was $1 million contract. And I had almost like 70% gross margins. Wow. Yeah. And when I bid it for it, some of the people, the folks knew, whether, my board or my investment committee or people even in my team, they said that I'm extremely foolhardy. And a thing which they have by then tried to sell into Middle East for 150,000, 200,000 range, I'm selling for 1 million. But I told them that the main thing remains. I'm not selling them 1 million because I'm greedy, but because along the way, there will be a lot of reworks. And these reworks I need to budget for and buffer for now. I can't go back to the client for every rework and tell him pay for it. Yeah. And he will be extremely frustrated and we won't be able to deliver to him. So let's start with a lot of margins in hand and buffers in hand, so that we can do them a wonderful product. And that worked. And then we never had to look back. He didn't just become my first customer. He was my best referral customer until about 5 years down the road, whoever got him. So eventually we got market leader status in Vietnam, in Thailand for this product. And the product then, literally became an awesome solution for the insurance industry, especially anybody who is starting from the scratch with a new license. And for almost like next 5 years, this company and this CEO was my reference customer. So whenever my customer in Vietnam say, can I talk to one of your customers? Yes. Yeah. They will come for a site visit and they will just get flowed. Then even a lot of customers told me on the sites, do you give them free after sale service or annual maintenance contracts that they give you such good reference? Can't believe it, man. So that's what the kind of, Yeah. So did you raise any money or did you work right off of the margin, I guess, in the beginning? No. It's a high margin business. Yes. And we continued like that. So that 60-70% doesn't remain ultimately. It will fall down to about 40-45% gross margins, but still you will manage a net margin of about 25 plus. And then if you look at EBITDA levels, you will still have 15-16. So company started generating a lot of cash. And that's like one of the best places you have to be. And we started increasing our product pricing. So finally, we almost went in for about 4-5 million. So literally got into a position where we have pricing power.
Yeah, and that's a common mistake of early stage founders. One thing that you want to look for is, can the founder raise money? But if they raise too much money too early, then that's also an issue, right? Because they're giving away too much. I mean, it's not good for the founder either, because you're giving away too much of your company. But then the other piece is, if you raise too much money, there's a lot of higher expectations, and you got to fit in those shoes. And if you don't fit in those shoes, I think the risk is that you might have to take a down round in like the next round, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, spot on. And that's one of the worst thing to do, right? As I say to all my founders, that valuation is not something to defend in this round, or is not something to brag about at the Friday evening party with all your friends and colleagues. Valuation is something you have to defend in the next round. And if you haven't crossed the chasm by way of the value creation, then you are in big trouble. Even if you don't do a down round, in today's time, probably they can still avoid making down round because so much liquidity is around. But still, I mean, you're literally now fighting with one hand tied. Instead, I always believe, that why it worked for, and why even it works for the founders that have done some amazing work, and the good ones from the gruesomes, is because they focus on the product. You have to really build something good, and you have to really give that, put that ahead of you, not your dilution, not your investors, not your quick successes. And often, our immediates become our biggest enemy of our ultimates. If you cannot grow that product, then you will never have that virtuous cycle of upward spiral.
Yeah. And the key too is to build once and sell twice, right? So I think what you did that was smart was, you probably had a lot of you learned like what the main features are, probably from your first client, and then they gave you a bunch of enhancements. And then I think that was probably, after those enhancements, that was probably a good place to be able to sell. All you had to do was sell, right? I mean, you probably have like multiple features, but when I think of like what you're building, it's what you build. It's almost like Bloomberg, right? I mean, there's the Bloomberg standard terminal. And then really, if you do get funding, or if you just invest off of your cash, really you need to just put money more on sales, right? Like and building the pipeline and then closing.
Yeah, and another thing happens, Joe, here is that in B2B kind of sales, these are not many customers around, even in each of these countries. Maybe we are looking at half a dozen to a dozen customers. So there are two sets of customers. There are one who are new joinees, because the central bank is giving licenses. These guys need to get off the block as quickly as possible. So therefore, these guys are looking for something which is proven and trusted. So if anyone has got it, so like looking at my first customer, 3 more customers in the next 3 or 5 years got licenses. Their first port of call was, call that vendor.
Yeah.
And already you have a product which fits them. They just
because if they can't even operate, they can't even be in business without the right like insurance software, right?
Exactly. The first American company I sold, they were in Vietnam. They just got license. The CEO's requirement is that I've got my license. I'm already behind the curve, and my IT team hasn't done a good job in selecting the vendor. The CEO said, 5 weeks, I want my motor insurance up and running. Otherwise, I don't start my shop. You have to give me that, else I am going to pull out the contract from you. And we went for it because we were very ready with motor. Motor was like our backbone product. And once I succeeded helping him out, that's a Fortune 50 insurance client in America. One of the top boys, big boys in town. And then on back of him, I got Bangkok. That means Thailand. I got Hong Kong. Then I got Singapore. And I went on, keep on getting. You see how even once I went to Boston to meet the top CTO out there, and they are all an IBM shop. And he says in that meeting, he told me that I was very reluctant to move out of my legacy. But somehow, Tom, who was an American CEO in Vietnam, he convinced. He says that, look, I can't use the IBM monolith to start my business in 5 weeks. The guys won't even be able to arrive here in 5 weeks. So, these things all fall in place and you start getting lucky. You need to know where your weaknesses are and where your strengths are. And then, along the way, you have to count your blessings.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think luck really comes from hard work, right? The harder you work. And I think, even with getting customers, the more customers you talk to, the luckier you get, right? So it's not really like a random luckiness, but I think that luckiness just compounds over just the effort, I would
Yep.
say.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
sometimes you get lucky too, right? People
Of
hit the
course.
lottery, right?
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
That first order that I got and at that
Mhm.
value that I was looking, that was lucky. It
Yeah.
was really lucky. But then it worked because, we knew that we were humble, we were amiable, we were,
Mhm.
the chemistry worked. That happened because we knew that, we have to learn. We have come to a new market. We don't know the localization.
Mhm.
Our products doesn't work. We have never sold for this type of. So normally in Islamic insurance, there is no life. But these guys have a form of life which they call it something else.
Mhm.
And that's their main business.
Yeah.
And therefore that we have to get that life insurance piece, and then
Mhm.
you are done. You get an extremely
Yeah.
strong component in your product. So those came in through their knowledge.
Well, the thing too is, when you enter a new market and you're also like a new company, you're like a clean slate. So whatever you build, it's exactly what they need, because the problem is like the other vendors, they had like an existing technology, right? And then they're like putting a Band-Aid on top of it, where like, I think when you came in, you just built exactly like from scratch. This reminds me, there was another business, I think it was called like Farmigo. This one company, I think the company exited, a few years ago, but it was a company for farming goods, and they would work directly with the farmers and get the farming goods directly to the grocery store. So what they did was they didn't even build anything. They just built like a clickable mock-up, like a flat screen, and then when you click, it like goes to the next page. So they showed that, and then they got some feedback, and then they said, hey, if this is what you want, just pay us. So they got the money first and then they built it. But again, once you get that product, your customer pays for it. As long as you don't have like some exclusivity contract, you can literally just use that same software and resell it.
Yes, absolutely. And as you said, we had very little legacy. Therefore,
Mhm.
we could do a lot of stuff. I mean, I see that even play out even today. I mean, why
Mhm.
Elon and Tesla is able to take all these automobile companies out? Because he doesn't have legacy. And the world doesn't realize that the Wall Street or the Main Street, the Volkswagen fans, they don't realize that. They
Yeah.
have ICE business which they have to protect. There are 200, 300, 400,000 people who are working there and they have to be paid
Mhm.
salaries. Elon doesn't have those problems. And therefore
Yeah.
he can march ahead without. So that's the advantage we always had. So we've always been
Mhm.
able to create ourselves always short of legacy. And
Mhm.
hence, when we were doing everything for one client, we were quite important for him. And therefore, it was like, I mean, they were more than keen to take up their fair share so that they can have a control and then, or at least they can save impairment from their business.
Yeah. One thing that I think would be good for education for the group is maybe some pathways that could happen if you get acquired. So I know one way is you sell the company, but you're still the CEO, right? And you might have like a vesting period for 4 years. So that's a great deal, right? Because you get, obviously you get a big payout in 4 years, but then you still get the CEO salary and you still get to run the company because there's no one else that could run it better than you. But then I think at some point, you might have to replace yourself. So that's one pathway that I'm familiar with, but maybe you can educate us on just a couple different ways, maybe even in Southeast Asia, that the exits happen. And that might be good learning.
Yeah, I think in a way, I believe, and I could be wrong, that, this part of the world, there isn't anything we do very differently. We actually learning from America. I think we
Yeah,
just now had a SPAC, and America has dozens of SPAC. I think the
sure.
SPAC came out of America. So this is
Yeah.
where it's different. And that's why we try to always play in America, because the kind of opportunities you get there, you will see the rest of the world is emulating, and then using protectionism to play to a large market, which is 3-4 times bigger than America. Like you see in India, we have 650 million WhatsApp users. America doesn't even have that population, right?
Yeah.
And then there are other countries in Asia who will then convert that into a local play, ban WhatsApp, and then make a mega cap come out. And then one day the government will go and kill them. So those kind of stuff, they happen there. So I don't think that, that in Asia, the expectation is that when you walk out, or when I'm buying you out, you will give me 2, 3, 5 years. But even essentially, I have seen in all my life, and most of the acquisitions that we had even done in the banks and all, actually this is where the things fail. And that's where I see a very new normal coming into our world, again, coming out of America. And that is probably first, at least in my recollection, first they were put in place by Google, and Tencent uses them very, very closely. So when you acquire, you don't merge them with you. You don't make it part of your building and your glass houses. You keep them in the garage. So you let them still, do that disruption that they were doing. Because the moment you bring them in your glass house and you put them in the corner office, disruption is lost.
Sure.
That's one way you do them. And although you may have a bigger stake, you don't micromanage them. There are a lot of things. Look at AlphaFold in Cambridge. Google is master in doing this. I mean, much of Google's value, I think people get it wrong. It doesn't come from search engines and its profits. Yes, it does come, but I think the real value comes. Google is an awesome VC in my mind. The way they pick up those techs, I mean, they really pick up the right ones. So the same thing Tencent does in a big way. So I think that's a very new normal or a narrative that I see coming out. And that's very, very productive and healthy. And I think every, my advice to every founding team will be, the entrepreneurs will be, that try to not give up your independence if you really, really believe in what you are doing. And even, in fact, another very good case in point is Snap. He had a 4 billion offer from Facebook. He refused it. And he went to shit, man.
Yeah.
But look at his spirits. Today he has given it back to Facebook in the same coin, right?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of a true founder. And these kind of founders is very hard to find outside America. There are very few. And the way their investors his investors have backed him. If it is in Asia or in Europe, I am 200% sure, Joe, the investors would have taken him to the woodshed.
Yeah.
Right? They will say, are you kidding me? You have a 4 million offer from Facebook, go and sell it. But that's where, the real outcomes come in. Just now we had a fantastic outcome with a cybersecurity company that sold off to Cisco, and Cisco paid us cash. We got almost like, nearly 4x in less than 3 years. It's a great outcome for our fund, for our investors. In fact, in just this exit, we are able to double our dividend from last year, this year. But then I would have always felt that if this company hasn't been acquired and they went on, in another 2 years' time, or maybe 1 year's time, it would have become a unicorn. And then in another 3 years' time, it would become a decacorn and listed thereafter. And by the time, we are into 7-8 years, that is, we are into the harvesting cycle. We have a great listed company, which has probably given us, so this company went into sub-billion dollar valuation. I didn't still become unicorn when Cisco picked it up. If we would have just stayed there for another 5-6 years, I think this company could have been a $100 billion company. So you just see 5 years, we could have actually got 100 times.
Yeah.
So that's a great outcome, not just for us, but for the founding team, for the entrepreneurs. It's like, very hard to sell off and start again. It takes a lot of work, at least in the initial years.
A funny expression I've heard is sometimes being a VC is like being a grandparent, right? Because grandparents, they give you money for Christmas, and you see them, you give them a hug, and then you let the kids do their thing. But parents are different, right? Parents are going to be on top of you to do your homework and make sure you do everything on time. So thought that was an interesting analogy, and I think that kind of goes along with what you're saying. Like, the founder, especially if they're a good founder, they're a fiduciary for the money. They want to make the most money possible too. So they're going to use their judgment, especially the really good founders, and they're going to be right to hold out if they don't sell too early, right? So if they're going to hold out and try to get the biggest return. But I guess on the flip side too, there could be founders that are just trying to cash out as soon as possible. But I believe that's what secondaries are for, right? So sometimes you can leverage secondaries to get a little bit of liquidity. If you want, if it's now, and because it's been so long, right? So some of the founders over time, they're going to have kids. Their kids may have to go to college, so that liquidity may be helpful, right? And I think that's what the secondary,
And I think the market is there, and I think the secondary market I see is most vibrant in America. That's another. You see, every piece of the puzzle almost like falls in place.
Yeah,
I have not seen a more vibrant secondary market anywhere else.
Yeah.
And that's such a great thing to be, right? It's like the companies that we lead here in Singapore. We also get a funding from the Singapore government, where we act as the investment managers under one of the programs. But it has to be Singapore companies, and we have to be lead investors in them. That's the only place where we lead. Our first main aim is to push them to go to America, both in terms of first in terms of market, then in terms of investment or investors. And because that's the holy grail, someday one has to crack. See, the Israelis, again, we look for is that who very clearly are already in America, or their main goal is that, no, I'm not interested in look at anywhere else. After raising this money, I'm going to America. I have looked at and talked to this customer, that investor. That's the kind of thing that what we have to look for. And that's the kind of investments that we try to do, because from every aspect, the ecosystem, the community is probably the most efficient out there. And constantly we see that. I mean, 5 years earlier, the secondaries was like such a damn squib, but today is like so much liquidity available in the secondaries.
Yeah. So is that so you're based in Singapore. Do you have an investment thesis in Singapore as well, or are you only mainly US and Israel? Like what other regions do you cover? Do you cover any other geographic regions outside of those three?
No, we do. Again, world is our oyster. You will be very surprised. We have investments in Estonia.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of people will say, where is that? So we have investments in Poland. And these are all, the companies who are really doing some groundbreaking technology work. And what we try to see next is why the entrepreneur is an entrepreneur. Is it that he wants to be his own boss? Is it that he's looking for a corner office? Or is it that he wants to get rich very fast and then retire in Hawaii? Or that he's really, really up there to solve a large, big problem? And that's what keeps him going. And he will go to the shit to take that problem out. And then we see, is that a large, big problem? And what this founding team really knows more than anyone else who are trying to crack this problem know about, so that they have a better chance to take a shot at it. And that's what, we look at. And then finally, we try to see, have we got anything wrong? We are the only ones in these lonely roads, or there are other investors also who are willing to put in their, I would say, unconstrained money, not easy money or free money coming from the government sources or from the government funding agencies, which is a order of the day for Europe. That's another very big problem we have. We normally try to avoid Europe because, European countries are, although there's European Union and looks like one homogeneous large playing field, but it is really, really very fragmented. It's very hard for a French founder to go to Germany, or for a Spanish founder to go to Germany, and things vice versa. So therefore, even if you do a good stuff, it's very hard to grow that up. And also, again, the European investors, the VCs normally behave more like PEs. They take a larger chunk of your cap table. And therefore, after a while, they start taking control of your business and then pushing to sell it to Siemens and to Bosch, and so that they can get their exits and they can write their returns to their stakeholders. Sure. So those, I think, is very detrimental to the basic narrative of a VC play. You have to really look for the long haul, because the good and the great stuff doesn't come overnight, doesn't come in 2, 3, 5 years. And to get something from ground zero, from 5 million to 500 million is the toughest thing. Once you get to 500 million and cross that, then you're 1 billion and then 10 billion, they will likely to come much faster. And that's where you need to do the right things and keep going and not throwing the towel. So that's where we try not to do, and again, it's contrarian plays. So we go to markets where they don't have much. And the next thing, they will be looking for larger markets, and they will actually go to the deep end of the pool, which is America. Like the Polish company we have there in no code, slow code. but they already, we invested in a Delaware C Corp. The founders are all in Poland. They are some awesome technical guys. So this is the way we look at it. We have done in Asia as well. We have an investment in India. We have in China. And of course, we have investments in Singapore. But our narrative is more or less the same. We don't try to, so we are basically looking for those three criteria. Are you solving a hard problem, big enough problem? Do you know something more about that problem that gives you a fair chance to crack at it, take a crack at it? And then are we the only guys, or there are other people who are willing to give you? Are you prone to valuation, or you are willing to give up dilution, take more dilution because your company needs it? Are you a VC or a founder who, normally we believe VCs go wrong, founders go wrong, entrepreneurs go wrong on two counts mostly. They take advice from wrong people and they hire the wrong people. The moment the money comes in, they start hiring. They go for a new office. That's where we have to really be extremely frugal. And that's where, you have to see whether you want to spend. Today, engineers are so very rare commodity. You want to hire some awesome engineers to do an awesome product, or you want to spend on DevOps, which is basically plumbing for you, that you can outsource to somebody, go in for automation. So that only way today, for example, we believe that the productivity gains can only come through automation because workforce is falling apart.
Yeah.
So this
that's really good. That's a really good deep piece of advice. Wrong advice, and just hiring the wrong people. What should somebody think about when they come into liquidity? The only reason why I ask is because there's a podcast called My First Million, and they interviewed the CEO of HubSpot, and they asked him like how he's thought about his life once he became a billionaire. And what he was saying is, there's only, even no matter how crazy you spend your money, there's only so much you can spend, right? Like, I mean, you can eat at like the highest, fanciest lobster restaurant, but there's still really like only really so much you can spend, right? So he's planning on just giving all his money away, and he doesn't really want to give his money to his kids either. So that's kind of interesting, right? Because you came into that wealth. So so you talk about that when you raise a lot of money, but you are getting into a new venture, right? Like you launched a company, you came into some liquidity. You sold the company, came into some liquidity, and then you wanted to start a venture fund. So what was going on in your mind? I guess, did you think about possibly starting another company, or did you? Yeah, what were the options that you had as you came into liquidity, and then what made you finally decide to be a VC?
Right. I think that 2 or 3 top recalls that I have of that moment is that probably I wanted something new, because I felt that the time and tide waits for none. Even I believe that. And life is one journey, and this is one life. So you have to start trying other things. So I've already been a banker. Then I had a founding journey that has given me a good outcome. Let's try and do something new without losing the value proposition, without losing what I see from here in the next 10, 20 years. So there, what I felt is that the values will really get baked in the private markets. Why? Because regulations are stifling, and regulation has a lot of baggage, governance baggage, independence of board baggage, and all those kind of things. While it doesn't save you, in my opinion, although I come from accounting or financing background, I feel while audits and all that is necessary, but if you really look through time, there has been biggest of the biggest frauds happened right under the nose of those auditors who were world class, so to say, the best brands. So this is nothing, no fail safe. So you have to basically go somewhere where there is the new world that is emerging, which is a disruptive world that is emerging, because the value is all out there. And secondly, I realized that technology is all pervasive. The power of technology is so humongous that it has made our world flat. There is now no way. I mean, today we have a supercomputer in our pockets. You go down 50 years back, or by the time the man landed in moon, we needed a house to house those computers. And then we needed a room to house those computers. And we today have you look at when we went to moon, the kind of computing power those computers had and what the Apple phone has.
Yeah.
I mean, and all this has happened because we could dare to dream and dare to change our world, the status quo of our world. And that's what technology has done for us. As a result, what information today we have in our fingertip, 200 years back, the nobility used to have them. 500 years back, only the royalty used to have them. And therefore, they could control us. So today, we are our own masters. We can chalk our own destiny. We can provide us the opportunity. We don't have to wait for anybody to give us an opportunity if we really aspire for and we deserve for. So with that being there, then that's something which is a constant. And we need to latch on to it.
Yeah.
So technology was and how I get to play the best. So that's where I came in. If I can invest in awesome journeys, led by some very resourceful founders. And then in that case, I have such a wide platter. Not that I'm being part of an ecosystem and a community that is doing some really cool stuff, but in the process, look what I'm learning. And the same, these two stories is what my investors come in. You know, another thing we do, we don't take institutional money. If you're an institution, I will tell you, sorry, I don't take your money. My aim is to democratize. On the other side of it, VC investing, private market technology investing for accredited investors. Today, the accredited investor definition, we are quite affluent to very easily cross. Even a manager level guy in a Fortune 50 or a Fortune 100 company, maybe even Fortune 500, is an accredited investor. He has more than 250,000 income in a year.
Sure.
But can he write a check to Sequoia? Will Sequoia take their check? A16Z, will they take their check? No. This is where we take them and we show them that ringside view, the fireside chat, where they can see what's happening in this amazing world of technology. And therefore, on the investor side, also, I'm unlocking a huge disruptive life cycle. And that's where my investors come in. And for them, the 1 and 2, that means ability to be part of something really, really cool happening. And then learning along the way. It's like, lifetime course in Berkeley or in MIT or in Harvard. Although I think they are teaching you far behind what the actual world is. The engineers that come out of the best of engineering colleges in America, I think they are not the ones that Google is looking for. And they have to really retrain them in much of those stuff. So that's another area where, and then if you can do this 1 and 2 so well, automatically your third thing will come in place. That is return of capital and return on capital. So your investors are happy. And that's the kind of thing I thought of myself. And then even, initially I thought I will not even take anybody's money. Whatever little I have, I will make some small bets out of that from whatever little I like. Because now I don't need to pay for my bills and buy food, think of how to bring food to the table. But then, first friends came in. They started saying, oh, you have an awesome exit. What are you doing next? We have done a fund. Why don't you take our money? I said, no, I can't take your money. I need license then.
Sure.
He said, go and take a license. We can help you, this, that. I know this lawyer. I know that regulator. But then, it started getting really ugly. They started complaining to, family, to my wife, saying that this guy has now become so big that he doesn't want to even take our money. So it started off with them. And then it's like, the word of mouth, they started referring some people. And that's how, even today, I get most of my investor money every year, either by re-ups from existing investors, which is a huge endorsement. Or existing investors referring their friends, their colleagues, their extended circle of and they coming in. So that's like, a real very different play that I'm looking at. And the whole idea today is how to do longevity. So this is like the second innings, but this is the last innings, and there is no retirement. You want to die with your boots on. In that, Charlie Munger and Buffett are our gurus. If they can walk at this age with so much of billions, then why not? So that's the narrative.
Yeah, and I think keeping your mind stimulated, that's also helpful to kind of keep you engaged, right? Because I think once you start, being less active, I think that's what kind of triggers a lot of these issues when you get older. Like from the cognitive standpoint, right? I mean, people get Alzheimer's, but there's different reasons why, right? I mean, it could be just, but I just think in general, like keeping your mind stimulated definitely keeps the blood flowing and keeps you engaged, and gives you some type of sense of purpose.
Yeah.
So
And it's again so gratifying to be
mhm.
in the league, or getting invited, if I may say, invited in the parties of the millennials, the Gen Y and the Gen Zs.
Yeah.
I mean, the way they think, the way they act, the way they walk, because today it's a very different generation. In our generations, our parents often knew more because they were longer in terms of time duration in this world. So they had experience.
Sure.
But today the Gen Zs and the Gen Ys, they can find out, Google can give them a quick, bump up, whatever you knew about, and probably you knew wrong, and Google tells them the right one.
Yeah. So what do you think the phone is going to be like 20 years from now? Because people are going to think we're dinosaurs, like, oh, wow, my dad used this thing called a phone, it's like this black thing that he used to hold. So what do you think it's, because we, think about the phone in the 80s, right? And now we have a supercomputer. So what do you think is going to be the next form factor?
So
is it going to be like Neuralink?
Yeah, of course. So I think the phone will be gone in next 20 years.
Yeah.
And
so
it's
you think
already
it'll be in our head?
come to our wrist.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, precisely. I mean, that's where we are headed. And look at it. Even I started off with a phone. I started off with a Nokia phone. It was like a brick. You can't even, carry it in your pocket. You have to put it in your bag. That's the kind of thing. But the people who bought those phones then, it's only because of them that, we get to use the phones that we are using today. They have taken so much of our rapid stride. And also, if you see ability of these founders to break away, I think the phone's biggest journey, smartphone's biggest journey, which I fully give credit to Apple, is I think mainly happened because Apple decided to do its own chip, design its own chip, and later make its own chips. And that's where it literally changed the level playing field for everybody. And if you really look at it, Intel couldn't even get that. Although then Intel CEO played ball with Steve Jobs, saying that he's interested in doing all that. If there are videos also in YouTube, you can see them. He's talking about it. But we all know from later on, Intel didn't walk their talk. He felt that Apple phones will not sell. And even if they sell, there will not be such a, cannibalize or finish Nokia, make Nokia Ericsson history. But, and Wall Street analysts give them a thumbs down because they are now going into areas which they should live to chip makers and chip designers. And they're just phone makers. But the ability of these founders to really go first principle down the road and then take control of what they need to really use to unlock their dream and make the whole world stand on its head, I think is what has happened. Many years later, Elon has done the same thing. He has taken these leaves out of Apple's book. He may not like Apple, but that's where, and this learning goes on. And I see Apple now learning a few things back from Elon.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Tesla is pretty much a data company, right? I mean, as much as we believe it's a car company, it's a data company. And I think what I'm seeing now is a lot of businesses that have multiple sub businesses that feed into each other, right? Because you got the data that feeds, APIs that can feed into other software and systems, and then you got the batteries, right? Then you got to refill the batteries, and then the batteries power your home. So there's a lot, I think if you can build businesses that kind of have several different flywheels that generate multiple lines of revenue, I think that's a common thing that I'm going to see now. One thing I want to ask, because you talked about the common mistakes that founders make, now you're an investor. So any advice? There's a few people here that are emerging fund managers. Any learnings that you want to share with us about, becoming a VC, and then, the top mistakes that you think, obviously, never lose money. That's the first mistake, but any other advice you would give, and just things that you think are top mistakes that you've seen from maybe other investors?
Right. I think the top mistakes as VCs, we would say, is to follow the crowd. where by the time crowd has figured out something, it's actually fully baked in. It's either fully valued or overvalued.
Yeah.
But that's where, the hype, we fall into hype. Like recently, if you see, I give you a practical example just now after this conflict started, Russia, Ukraine. So now there is a very clear possibility, which even I agree with, that with the sweeping sanctions that has been slapped on Russia, Russia will now take the war back to across the Atlantic by cyber attacking American postal boys. And they are quite vulnerable, in my opinion. American Airlines and so on and so forth. This will name and shame them. It's a very likely possibility. If I can think about if I were like them and what is going on us, somewhere some retaliation will come. So if today we start buying cybersecurity has all gone up. In fact, there's a cybersecurity ETF. Look at that. That ETF itself has gone up so much in this crashing market.
Sure.
So this is where you are making the wrong mistake. You are behind the curve. You have to tell yourself, yes, I missed it, and I'll give this a pass. Don't jump in now. That's where you make all those mistakes.
Sure.
Rather, we were investing in cybersecurity since 2018. And we always believe that even today, it is a very, very under invested space. The amount of investment that goes in writing softwares, we hardly put a fraction of that money in protecting those softwares.
Yeah.
And our home Wi-Fi's are the most vulnerable. And the more we work out of home and remotely, which is a constant. I mean, no matter COVID or no COVID, the ease and convenience that these has given us, we will continue to work remotely and from home. And with Starlink coming in, now I can work from Grand Canyon or in Yellowstone.
Sure.
So why do I really need to go back to the wall, to the brick walls of New York? So with that coming in, we have to be extremely, there will be a lot of work that needs to go there. And then a lot of, not just, there's a hype now from the investor cycle, there's a FOMO, fear of missing out, and they're jumping in big time. And that's where the pricing is getting inflated. There's also a lot of startups starting themselves or pivoting into saying that, oh, we are cybersecurity. From cloud to cybersecurity. This is where you have to really, really be very, very careful. You have to catch them when the waters are tranquil and not when the waters already have a tsunami in them.
Yeah.
That's one main mistake we do. And for that, we have to see the long hill. You have to really ask yourself every day from whatever you are reading and whatever real or fake you have been sold by CNBCs and Bloombergs of the world, New York Times, Washington Post, because they are also mouthpieces. You have to remember of their owners. So you have to really take them with a pinch of salt. And then whatever you are learning, reading, you have to do your own narrative. And that narrative should show you what's in the next 10 years. Like you asked me, where is the phone? I think the phone is gone. And therefore, if Apple cannot change to something new that will survive, then Apple is also gone. So therefore, that's the kind of thing we have to look for. And then what's coming in next 10 years, we have to start looking for outstanding plays in those next 10 years. I give you another example. Many of them may not even see light at the end of the tunnel. Web3 is an area where there is a lot of promise. But the way today Web3 is working, much of this may not even fructify. And the final end game or near about the end game that being sold about Web3 is much of that is imagination. It's Steven Spielberg movie or Star Wars movies. Today, we are nowhere near that. So there's a huge journey that has to happen and a lot of things has to change in the ecosystem and in the community before that can happen. It may not even happen. And more importantly, what we see is that investors have already jumped into that bandwagon of Web3 and they're pouring money left, right, center. This is where things really can go wrong. Then there is a lot of naysayer. Even today, as compared to Web3, I see a lot of shorts in Tesla who says that this is the reasons why Tesla will fail and why Tesla is overvalued. So this is a very good thing. When the main street is telling you that wrong, overprice, that's probably where the value is. Rather than when the main street is saying, oh, no, Web3, cybersecurity. This is what kind of, narrative I have always tried to avoid. And for that, I have also missed a lot of opportunity. I tell myself the error of commission is much more brutal than the error of omission. Let me omit a few opportunities. I miss them. Sorry, too bad. But the ones I really grab on, they should not more often fail than, click.
Yeah, there was a mentor of mine that gave me the expression, it's easier to miss a wedding than go to a funeral. So if
Awesome, man. I'll probably use that next time.
It's like, you missed a couple weddings, but look, you're still alive. So you didn't go, you didn't have to go to a funeral. But this was a lot of fun. I know you're really busy, and I know we're past the hour, but appreciate you taking the time out. I'm really blown away about your story. And I always love hearing the entrepreneurial origin story, so it's always great to hear, just building something. And I think what's really great is just really thinking about what the customer wants. So if you can build exactly what the customer wants, I think the three pieces you said, to recap is really, doing something different, having unique knowledge, and then just solving like a really huge problem, right? So I think that's really helpful to keep in mind for the audience. So again, thanks for coming out, and really appreciate your time, and hope we get to hang out in New York at some time.
Yeah, sure. In fact, I come to America quite often. In fact, 6 months I spend here, and then 6 months I'm traveling, mostly in America and in Israel.
That's great. Well, if you come out to New York, let me know. We'll do something.
Sure, of course. And we'll stay in touch, and we'll circle back. I'm happy
absolutely.
to join in any such conversations if you think the audience will be benefited from there, because it's all about our community. It's if you can really create a very vibrant community, everything else will fall in place. And last of that is return on capital and return on capital.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. And
so I met Jeshua through my Slack channel. So I have a Slack channel. So I think he posted something, and then I direct messaged him, and now we're on a web show. So
sure. Awesome, man. And that's the great thing about our community. I mean, this is how we forge our relations. I mean, it's so amazing and so gratifying.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, VC is a CRM business, right? So you're really you're managing your CRM, you're connecting with people, and sometimes, what's crazy is sometimes that person that you're engaging with, right? They may be a founder now, and you're a VC that passed on them, and hopefully you're nice to them, because you never know, 10 years from now they may be your LP, because they maybe came into some liquidity or something. So it's definitely a small world. Absolutely. We have to always tell ourselves every day that there are always people better than us out there. So never be flashy, never be jazzy. Humility is the first and the only mantra of whatever we do. We have to be humble. Yeah. And the moment we are doing that, we will find out more than others, and we will do more than others. That's the crux of it. Even if you see in that the entrepreneur story, I said, what we look at entrepreneurs, do they know something more than others in their field or that problem that they're trying to solve? Yeah. That's the most vital important thing. And that you will only be able to see. They're actually lying in front of us. We can only be able to see once we are humble. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And we count our blessings. Yeah. Yeah, well, really good advice, and appreciate all the wisdom, and yeah, hopefully we all get together sometime, and I guess have a good rest of the week. Sure. And likewise, if you're ever traveling this side, do not give us a shout. More than happy to host you. No, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And Jeshua, thanks for bringing us together for this.